It's time to get rid of the veneer and make the workplace more human.
This podcast is brought to you by Arcamed, fast and focused design and manufacturing.
I'm Greg Maurer, founder and owner of Arcamed.
And I'm Caroline Squatrigo, Talent Engagement Specialist. We are on a journey to grow, learn, and gain expertise in small to mid-size company culture. Join us.
Okay, Caroline, what's the question of the day?
Well, today we're going to tackle the big question of how to make the workplace more human. To start off with this episode, we will be joined by Arcamed's own Derek Jahnke. Derek is one of those people who's 100% human 100% of the time, so we're excited to hear his thoughts on this. And he can tell us how that has impacted his team dynamics as he's taking on a leadership role. And then later we'll be speaking with Dr. Josh Plaskoff. Josh spent many years in industry and currently teaches MBA classes on the human aspects of business, including leadership and organizational behavior.
I'm looking forward to this. Let's bring Derek in and hear what he has to say.
Well, today we are joined by Derek Jahnke. Derek is Arcamed's operations manager. And as we said in the intro to this episode, he is just one of those 100% human people. He is great at bringing his entire self to work, and he's really good about learning about other people and takes a genuine interest in his people. So we wanted to bring him on. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Great. Well, we are excited to hear from you. And I mean, I really just want to know how you do it. How do you bring this human nature to work, and how do you draw it out in other people?
Well, now that I'm getting recognized for the results of my human nature, I'd love to say it's something, a skill that I've been honing for decades and fine tuning to get the most out of it. But to be honest with you, it's something that just came to me pretty naturally. But I have started to see the results of how it can be used in different ways, and it's something that I've been more conscious about and realizing that I can use it to get more out of not only the relationships that I've already had, but out of other people that I have not been able to establish relationships with. So it's definitely been a journey as I've tried to make it more intentional, I should say.
So can you give us an example, maybe without names, but give us an example of how it's worked?
Well, so when I look at it, especially transitioning from my previous role where I was a salesman for the company, and now I'm in a managerial role where I'm over the operations of the facility for cases and trays. I'm no longer just asking questions and trying to get information. I'm actually assigning tasks and setting expectations and deliverables for people. And a lot of times that's not what they want to do or what they think is the best thing to do at the time. So I think having had established these relationships from the beginning where it's not just a boss subordinate relationship, we have a little bit deeper connection, so we're able to communicate at different levels. Yeah, sometimes it may come off as the person challenging me more than what people traditionally might think of as acceptable in the workplace, but to me it's just our relationships there. This is how we're going to talk to get through this problem. So whether or not it seems traditionally acceptable or it doesn't really matter, we're getting things done, and we're getting it done our way. It doesn't feel like someone's being assigned something so they're going to do it because they have to. They're going to do it because they feel that's what we both believe is the best course of action, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And we have a future episode that we're where we're going to discuss the book Multipliers, and really you hit on one of the things that the Multipliers book suggests we do, which is encourage dissent and open debate and that kind of discussion. So I think that's part of the benefit of making the workplace more human with these relationships.
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think there's just a different element that comes in when you're able to talk to someone and you're not just looking at the task at hand, you're thinking about them as a whole person. You know, we're all here to accomplish something great together and to get a job done together. And when we're on the same page and we care about each other's success, which I do believe that's ultimately what developing these relationships kind of puts into the big picture for everyone. Um, I think that's what takes us further and allows us to push each other to greater extents.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great, and I can attest firsthand. There is a presence about you, and I often leave conversations with you feeling more confident about myself. Whatever the conversation was, often it's around a decision, and we come to a conclusion together. And I also feel like, I can be honest with you, and you're not going to fault me for that. So I think that's a great thing that you do. But yeah, I think, you know, continue to do it because it's great to see. And if you wouldn't mind teaching me one day to be better about this, I would enjoy that as well.
Well,
Uh,
until that happens, we can look to our next guest, Dr. Josh Plaskoff, on how to do it. It comes naturally to Derek, and Derek's shared how it's improved his ability to run his department. But for some of us, it's less natural. So let's bring on Josh and figure out how we can make the workplace more human. So Dr. Josh Plaskoff is with us. He has served in a variety of employee experience and human resource positions, including MS Communications, Exact Target, Anthem, and he currently teaches classes on the human aspects of business at the Kelley School of Business at IU and the Western Governors University. Josh, thanks a lot for coming on. Today's topic is about making the workplace more human, which seems like a sort of straightforward task, but when I began to think about it, it was a little bit difficult to pin down. So, love to hear your thoughts on how to make the workplace more human, and maybe why you reached the conclusion that that's important.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's actually a deep passion of mine. Because when I started in the business world, I realized that there was a lot of competition and kind of crushing other people to move ahead. And you figure you're working, or you're spending at least 8 to 10 hours a day at work, and that's a huge portion of your life. Why not have in your life joy and happiness and working with people and feeling like you're with a great group of people growing and everything else, in the workplace, just like you do at home? It shouldn't be different. And so I probably about 20 years ago, somebody asked me, what's your kind of life mission? And I said to make the workplace more human. It just kind of came out. And ever since then, I've been working on it. I think you're right. It is a little bit more challenging because of sort of the views that we have and sort of what's been assumed and what's built into us in terms of society and the workplace and what we're taught in business schools and everything else. Kind of pushes us away from that, of understanding the workplace as a place of humanity and community and connection. They're almost taboo, to say that four-letter word love. Oh gosh, I actually was in a company where they did that. Southwest Airlines came to speak, and it was a very traditional company that they came to, and it was a big auditorium, lots of scientists and business people and accountants and all kinds of people. And the vice president got up and said, "The Southwest Airlines, we're about love." And you can hear this gasp in the audience, like, "Did he really say that? Did he say that word? Are you
Right.
allowed to say that in this organization?" And uh, it was just, for me, it was just a real memorable situation, because it was like, yeah, why can't we say certain things or do certain things in organizations? Why is it not allowed to be who you are and to have some of the same feelings that you have outside the workplace, inside the workplace? So yeah, I've spent most of my
Yeah.
career just working on that and trying to figure out what to do. So
We got a bit of a view about making the workplace less human during COVID,
Yeah, yeah,
where you're interacting less and you're not touching anybody.
yeah,
You know, somebody's grieving. Let's say they just lost a loved one, and you know they need a hug, but there was no hugging during COVID.
right.
You know, you just sort of stood 6 feet away and said, you know, I'm really sorry for your loss. That was inhumane, not human at all.
Yeah, yeah. It's I'm hoping that COVID has helped open, and I've heard from people that it helped open up people's eyes to, that old song, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Hmm.
Um, we kind of think, well, this is great. We get to work from home and the flexibility and everything. But then there are a lot of people who said, I miss seeing people. And when we wore masks, you miss seeing the bottom half of people's faces. You didn't realize how much you learned and got from a smile, from that part of the face. You only saw eyes, and I've actually heard a lot more about. Now, some companies are looking at this as an opportunity. Oh, good, now we can, let people be home and save money on real estate and all of that, um, I'm hoping that people see that it's more of a time where maybe we need to realize how important being with each other is and what it does in terms of our humanness and being able not just to touch but to see, to just be around people. I think there's a difference between being in person with people. I always think about dogs. What would happen to dogs if they went on a Zoom? They became a Zoom civilization. The whole dog world would collapse because they couldn't smell each other, know who the alpha dog is, and all that kind of stuff. And I think we work the same way. I think we get to know people by things that we don't even know goes on when we're with people. There's a certain thing that happens to us that we can't transmit through a computer. So yeah, I think it's challenged us, to maybe think about it more deeply about what the importance is of being human and creating a human workplace, which is hopefully a good thing. Hopefully we'll look at this as an opportunity to challenge. But you're right.
So I'm curious, even though, a lot of COVID restrictions are now passing us, a lot of companies are choosing to keep at least some sort of this working from home, whether it's like a hybrid, or a lot of companies sold their offices, or
Yep.
gave up on their leases during COVID, and now that's how it is. We're a completely remote company. Um, I mean, what's your reaction to that? You're talking about the importance of that human interaction. A lot of people are happy that they get to stay home, but I think you're right, and it's hard to replicate that time together in an office every day. Um, do you think that it's kind of a recipe for failure, or do you think it's something we can overcome?
I'm always cautious because it's sort of like, the old saying that everything is good in moderation. And I think it may have opened eyes to certain things, like, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've had to fly to, from California to Washington, D.C. for a meeting and then fly back the same day. And it seems so stupid. What a waste of money. And, um, for those kinds of things, it would make sense to say, wait a minute, there's a different way we can do this where we could save money and we could make it more efficient and effective. But then there are other things where we overgeneralize too much and we say, you know what, this is the new way of working. And trying to run a strategy session or brainstorming session online with a bunch of people is not the same thing as being in a room together. It just isn't. And so I'm cautious about it in the sense that I think what we tend to do is we tend to, I hate to say it, like put our eggs in one basket. It's like, it's either this or it's this, and go to the extremes, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, how can we really think through this so that it's optimal, and so that we get rid of some of the things that we used to do that just didn't make any sense, but they were just kind of assumptions that we did, and how do we keep some of the things that we know are really beneficial to our organization to create that sense of humanity. And there's a lot that happens in an organization. I know for me, I don't know about you all, but just walking between meetings, You stop in someone's office and say hi and just have an exchange. There were all these things about water cooler conversations and, just things that pop up just by being around people. But how often do you spontaneously call somebody on Zoom or on Teams just to say hi? You don't. Everything's planned. And some of the best things and ideas and relationships and innovations have come from just happenstance meetings that happen walking through the hallway. And so what I'd be afraid of is that we're going to miss some of that element of work, which is the social. We always look at socializing as waste of time. It's not waste of time. It's actually critical to work. Talking with people, understanding about their family life, understanding about what's going on. Greg, you had mentioned about mourning, when somebody loses a family member. How feeling is it to send a Zoom message to somebody when they've lost a loved one versus have them in the office and sit with them, and mourn with them and cry with them or whatever it is. Those are things that I think are really important to build an organization, because we're trying to build not only a thing that produces product and makes money, but we're trying to create a place of meaning where people can find meaning in what they're doing with other people to make that happen. And if it just becomes creating this money making thing and that's it, and that meaning piece and that community piece disappears, we're not that the product isn't going to happen. It's just not going to happen, because the engine comes from the relationships of the people. It comes from the people.
So you identified two things I latched onto. One is community,
Yeah,
and the other is spontaneity.
yeah,
And those two things you can only get if you're collaborating and working together, in person. And then you weigh that against convenience and efficiency, so that you end up with a hybrid model or even a tailored approach, by department, by person. This person comes in, the office 4 days a week, this one 5, this one 3. But I do think it's a balance. But what the thing that's showing up is that there's really just two ways to look at it. One is transactional kind of approach, right? I come, I give you my work skills time in exchange for a paycheck, and that's it. That's the transaction.
yeah.
And the other is a relational kind of
Right.
view,
Right.
where we are doing something together, accomplishing this together, part of a community that involves lots of different things, and including transactions, but it's all part that makes up of a relationship. And I think some people are just transactional in nature, and some people are looking for that relational aspect.
Yeah. I think you made a really good observation, and it fed into something I've always thought about in terms of organizations. And I think about it, and I call it my two sibling model, because I have two sons, and they're very opposite of each other. One is very organized and structured and tends to be very logical, and the other one is very emotional and spontaneous and relational. And I think and basically they live in the house and they constantly are battling with each other. I mean, they're constantly fighting, and I mean, just yesterday we had this, like, I was just sitting there watching and saying, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I mean, because they say one thing, the sky is blue. No, the sky is yellow. The sky is yellow. No, the sky is blue. And, back and forth and back and forth. And, I look at it as a parent and I say, I've got to parent this household. I can't throw out the children, because then, what is it? The Child Protective Services would come and really nail me. I can't throw them out. I've got to parent them. And I love both of them.
Right.
So what do? You can't throw one out. And I think organizations work the same way. You've got two children in the organization. You've got the machine, which is what we tend to think about organizations as. It's the efficiency and effectiveness and managing things and getting profits and short-term thinking and, how do we quantify and all of that. And then we have the community, which is about caring and about connecting and about relating and about spontaneity and innovation. And those two siblings live in our organizations and don't get along with each other. And what a lot of organizations and a lot of theory in businesses, business schools and business theory says is throw out one of the children, throw out the community. We don't need that. Let's just focus on the machine because the machine is going to produce. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's like you said, it's not even a balance. It's living in the tension of these two opposites that have to coexist, and they have to bounce off of each other, and they have to almost fight with each other, and you need to manage it somehow so that you get the best of both of them. And it's a not an either or, it's a both and that's a hard thing for us to deal with because we're so used to either or thinking it's either this or it's this. But this is not. It's two opposites that have to be a both and. They have to reside in the same house. And the simple solution is throw out one of them. But that's a bad solution because the engine is really the community. The engine, and I loved your terms about transactional and relational, or transformational. That's another word. Transactional, and I use the ideas of contract versus covenant. We don't use the word covenant very much anymore, but contract is a quid pro quo. You give me something, I give you something. And that's the only relationship we have. I use you. You're exploiting each other. But there's no other moral responsibility. If it messes up, you take the person to court and you're done. But a covenant is a different kind of relationship. It's a community relationship, which means I have a moral obligation to you. I have a responsibility to you as being part of this group. And I've chosen to be part of this group. And therefore, I take on that responsibility of treating you with dignity and respect, of trusting you, of working with you, of helping you, and vice versa. And it's not I'm using you for anything. We're trying to do something together to produce something. So do you get rid of the contract? You absolutely can't, because that's how our world works in a lot of ways. There is a lot of quid pro quo and exchanges and all that. We have to do that. It's part of business. But you also can't get rid of that community piece, because that piece is what keeps us together as a society and keeps us going. And so that's the challenges of keeping a human workplace is how do you keep both of those siblings working together? How do you parent that organization so that they are getting what they need? They're being nourished appropriately and working with each other. And that's, to me, was where the humanity is. It's not getting rid of one or the other. It's finding that tension in the middle of being able to do both. So yeah, I love what you just said about the relational and the transactional, because I think that's the key.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big key to it.
I mean, I think we've all witnessed those two characters butting heads,
Yeah.
and potentially been in the middle of it or been one of the people. I think I have been, for sure. And I guess how, as leaders and also just overall organizationally and culturally, how can we help those two people, whether it is actually two people or two groups of people or whatever? How can we help them have that conversation and coexist, and I mean, probably end up coming out with a better solution than if we had just taken either one of their solutions on the front end? How do we help facilitate that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think part of the challenge is it involves a really new, challenging type of technology called conversation. And we've sort of lost the art of conversation. And by conversation, I'm leaning more towards something called dialogue versus discussion. If you think about it, discussion comes from the same root as concussion. You're kind of banging somebody over the head with your point of view and saying, this is how we're going to do something. And I'm going to try and win. And it's a win-lose kind of situation. A dialogue is where you throw things out on the table. You don't come completely empty of a position, but you throw things out on the table and you see, where is this taking us? Where is this going? How can we then, mold the type of environment that we want? And part of it is the recognition that those two things are existing, and we need to feed both of those. So how do we feed both of those? And how do we work together? Some people will be much more attuned to the community kind of approach in the business world, and some people will be more attuned to the machine. But the question is, how do you appreciate the other side even though it's not your thing? And that's the key, is how do you help people have that dialogue so that they appreciate the other piece, even though it may not be their primary way of looking at it, but they can say, oh yeah, really, I do need to back off, and I need to let this person sort of take us in this direction that's maybe more of the community, or maybe I need to back off on the love language and we need to focus on our results a little bit. So I think it's getting that understanding from everyone about the what we're doing when we're sitting in an organization together, and when we're sitting in a group together, which I think is sort of a lost art. I think we've become very fragmented in terms of how we work with people. And going back to the COVID thing, I think a lot of using the technology has challenged us to that we need to spend even more time now figuring out how to work with each other. If you think about it, many of the business schools, and even many college programs, don't teach how to work as a group, how to work as a team. It's just assumed you put people in team projects and just let them go. But do we teach people how to work as a team? What does it mean to be a team? How do you communicate differently as part of a curriculum? Generally, we don't. You teach them a lot of this stuff about finance and marketing and all that kind of stuff, and you let them do team programs, but you never give them the tools that they need and the guidance that they need to know how to do that. So part of it is spending that time learning and learning how to do that, and committing to doing that, so that you have good conversations, you recognize what you're in, you also recognize your own personal relationship with it, so you know what's challenging for you and what's not challenging for you, so you know your strengths and your things that you like to stay away from. And then you say, now how do we take all of our strengths and put them together so that we can use all of the sides of our humanity to make this a reality?
Yeah, I think you hit on something really interesting, Josh, which is uh, business schools don't spend enough time teaching students the softer skills required to be successful in business. And to the extent they teach them anything, it's about advocacy rather than about dialoguing to the right idea that might not be the one you brought into the room.
Yeah.
And looking back, I thought that while I majored in finance and I know how to read balance sheets and profit and loss statements and et cetera, I should have taken 12 credit hours on psychology.
Yeah.
That really would have come in handy. Instead of spending time in debate class, that I should have learned how to take in philosophy and learned how to have conversations and dialogues. And I also like the way you talk about the machine, right? The efficiencies and the profits, and then the community and relationships you call the engine. And I think that's our philosophy essentially. That we decided that if Caroline and I and others, but that if the two of us focus on the engine, then the people will focus on the machine. So if we invest in our employees and make sure we worry more about them as our internal customers and less on the external customer, then they'll worry about the external customer, and ideally the investment we make, which is a real expense.
Yeah.
It's real dollars, will show up in better profits, higher revenues, more efficiency, et cetera. That's the theory.
Yeah. And that was the lesson that Southwest Airlines learned. So Southwest Airlines is about love. So their stock ticker is not SWA, it's LUV. That's their 3-letter symbol for the airline, LUV. And if you look at their logo, there's a heart on it. If you look at all their seats, there are hearts on it. Now, when I ask people, who is the love for, most people say the customer. It's not. It's for the employee. Because the idea is, if the employees care about each other, if the employees love each other, it will rub off on the customers. If the employees don't, it'll show. You can't love the customer and not love each other in a business. And I think your point about studying, whether it's studying philosophy or psychology or whatever, it's important, I think, to recognize that business, any organization, is about people. Ultimately, it's about people. 99% of what you do is people. It's about relationships. It's about talking. It's about communicating. And the technical stuff is like that's the easy stuff, actually, because you can learn that pretty quickly. What's hard is understanding how to deal with people, how to deal with conflict in a productive way, how to connect with people, how to care, all, be a team, all of those things. And those are things that we spend the least amount of time on learning, on it, getting educated about, and all of that, at the expense of all the technical stuff. We figure if you know the technical stuff, then you'll do great. It's actually the opposite. If you know the people stuff, you'll do much better, because
Yeah.
that's what businesses, that's what organizations are about. It's about relationship. And that's,
Yeah. That was a realization
yeah.
where the studies show also that EQ
Hmm.
and other soft skills, like grit and other things, but
Yep.
EQ beats IQ
Oh yeah.
easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that put me on an EQ journey. And I did my first audit, 360 review, and I did not score well.
Mm.
That was a big wake up call. That I kept wondering, why am I hitting people wrong or coming off wrong, or not getting what I've intended to get out of conversations or folks, and it was on me.
Yeah. Yeah. and
I wasn't human enough, I
And what's
guess.
challenging? Well, you're you're human. It's just that there's some place where to develop. We all have places to develop, and places that are gaps in us. Everyone has gaps and blind spots and all of that. And part of the life journey and the life curriculum is to figure out what are those blind spots and how do we understand them better, and how do we understand ourselves better and understand others. And I think that spending time on that is so important. Um, and we focus a lot on what's measurable. You know, Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff, even though psychologists say we can, I don't think is as easily measurable. It doesn't fit in the model of what we're used, the scientific, true scientific models that we're used to, the kind of the empirical scientific, kind of models. And so we dismiss it as, well, because it's part of the machine. The machine is very scientific, it's very measurable. This is not. How do you measure love? How do you measure caring? How do you measure hope? Oh, we can create an instrument. Yeah, but is that really measuring it? Is that really determining what it is? Because it's not as simple as, you know, and we are actors as opposed to behavior. I tell my classes, I said, my dog wakes up in the morning, and she scratches herself, and she goes outside and does her thing, and she comes in and she eats her food, and she acts like a dog, or she behaves like a dog. The planet Venus has an elliptical orbit that basically is the same orbit all the time. The planet Venus can't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I hate this elliptical orbit. I think I'm going to do a square orbit for a change, because I need to mix things up a little bit. It follows the laws of physics. It behaves according to the laws of physics. The dog, my dog, can't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to be a cat today. I'm sick of being a dog, and start meowing and purring and all that. They behave according to dogdom. We, on the other hand, can wake up in the morning, and if we want to run around like a monkey all day, we can do it. We have choice. So we act as opposed to behave. We have some behavior, but we act, which means we have choices, we have intent, we have meaning, we have consciousness of what we're doing. And it's unpredictable. And that's what makes things challenging. Is a lot of times what we've done, the machine model is based off the idea of humans as behaving. We can control, we can predict, we can measure behavior. And that's not true. We can't. We can't predict. We can't control. We can influence, but we're discovering a little bit more that humans are much more dynamic than we thought, much more flexible than we thought. And the idea of human nature is even a question. Is there a human nature? We don't even know if there's a human nature, because we say, oh, that's human nature. But then you can find tons of counterexamples where, no, that's not how they act. So wait a minute,
Yeah.
how's it human nature, but they're not acting this way? So even the
It's
idea
because
of
people are,
human nature is in question. So that makes it much less a machine than this other thing that we need to think about as being human, you know?
because people are wired so differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about human, what does that mean? It means something it shows up differently. So I think about someone being very extroverted versus introverted. There's shy people. There's people who are just naturally really reserved. There are people who are stoic and they have no nonverbal communication whatsoever. And the people who need nonverbal communication are wondering why this person doesn't like them or doesn't like their idea because they're not gesticulating and nodding. So how does all these differences impact how someone comes off as human?
Yeah.
Are you bringing your real self to work?
So I really like the work that Carl Jung, the Swiss psychotherapist, did on this, because what he decided or determined, he was actually the originator of the words introvert and extrovert and some of the words that we use.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. And what he expressed is that in reality, we have all of this capability in us, but we have certain ways of operating that we are comfortable with. So it's kind of like writing with your right and your left hand. I'm right-handed, but I can switch hands and write with my left hand. It's just not going to be as clean. It's going to be sloppy. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's never going to be as good as my right hand. And in some sense, like introversion, extroversion, we all have introversion and extroversion in us. It's just that some prefer one over the other. And if we operate in the opposite, we can, but it just feels uncomfortable and it feels unsafe or it feels quirky or it just doesn't feel right. And
exhausting.
It's exhausting. You need to get in a hot tub with some wine and, just mellow out a little bit.
Right.
But you can do it. You can do it. So, the idea here, and this is a lot of what I teach, is there are these kind of ways of operating that are built into us, but there are different ways of expressing it. And what we need to do is understand, and this is where I think a lot of diversity work comes in, is understanding that these differences are what make us human, and how do we understand them and not reject them? Because what we'll tend to do is what's not stable in us or what we don't like to use in us, we will project onto other people as being a negative. It's actually kind of interesting. It's actually both an attraction and repulsion at the same time. So the idea of opposites attracting, I've been teaching this for a long time, and almost everybody tells me, yeah, my spouse or my significant other is the opposite of me and blah, 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 blah. So there's this attraction, but at the same time, there's this repulsion because it's something we don't like about ourselves that we don't like to express. So, like with me, I'm not a very organized person. It's just not my forte. I'm not very detail oriented. As a matter of fact, my wife jokes around and says, I can't believe that they actually allow you to teach a class with the word organization in the title, because you're the most disorganized person in the world.
That's funny.
She's very organized, extremely organized. And it drives me crazy sometimes. But at the same time, I know that's a good thing, because if we're planning a family trip, I'll let her do it, because if I do it, we're going to end up in like Des Moines. And if she plans it, we'll end up in Bermuda, So, part of this is understanding that these differences are actually what the richness of being human. And if we can, organizations, bring all those out, all of them, and realize that all of them are part of reality. So, we tend to look at our slice of reality and say, this is what reality is. But in reality is actually divided into all these things, these pieces. We only see parts of it. It's actually a unity, but we only see parts of it, the parts that we understand. But other people may see a different part. And that doesn't mean it's not real. It just means we can't see that piece of it. But if we put those two together, now we've got a better view of reality. Wait a minute. So they saw this piece, I saw this piece. Let's put them together, put the puzzle pieces together. And now we're starting to see maybe a better picture of what we're facing here. But what we tend to do, because of the way and maybe this is part of human nature, is that we tend to focus. Attention is kind of maybe a key to some of the human nature, is that we have certain kinds of attention. So we focus on something and then we jump to the conclusion that that's reality. It's the only reality. And that's why we get into battles and fights sometimes, is that, oh, you're stupid. What's the matter with you? But they're seeing something completely different, because they're using a different part of their ability to perceive, and something that maybe you don't use. So, part of what I love about creating a human workplace is thinking about diversity, not just in terms of ethnic diversity and and gender diversity and age diversity, all those kinds of kind of the standard things about diversity, but also thinking about diversity of perspective, just general perspective of reality, of perception, and saying, people are seeing things different ways, and that doesn't mean they're not true. It just means that we may not see that. And the best way of creating a human workplace is to bring them all together and say, boy, now we can see things in a whole different light. Now we can see a different world that we're facing here. Anyway, that's I love to teach this to people because you see their eyes open and it completely changes their life. Their relationship with their families, their relationship with their kids, it just all of a sudden the light goes on and they say, wow, now I get it. Now I see it. I've been trying to change this person into who I think they should be, as opposed to just letting them be who they are and appreciating who they are, even though I don't quite get it. It's okay.
Yeah, I feel like the more we learn about this and the more people we talk to, it all connects more for me and hopefully our listeners. And I mean, everything you're saying, it really resonates. It reminds me of the episode we did on tools, tools like PI and EQ and DISC.
Yeah.
And that's like the scientific tool, but it all gets back to measuring like who this person is and how to work with them. And to your point, building a team that includes diversity of thought, because I'm someone who does not detect conflict easily, for example. So like I know the people in the building who are very like aware of that, and I go to them and I'm like, did I upset anybody today?
Yeah.
Please tell me, because I don't know. Like I very well could have, and I would like to know so I can not do that. But it's true, and you need to have those people who are your gauges and your weak spots so that you can go and ask the right questions. But yeah, I think you hit on a lot of important things, and it is. I think people, we like to think of the office sometimes as this place we just go to work, but we're there so many hours of our lives. We spend so much time with these people. We might as well enjoy it. We might as well get along with the people we work with and make it a human environment. So I really appreciate your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah. No, I think the idea of a gauge, and I think you brought up a great point. Relying on other people for what you can't see, and not thinking about yourself as incomplete or broken or anything like that. It's just, you think about it, the opposite is, hey, this person has a gift that I can learn from. Look at it more in terms of the gift that the others have rather than a deficiency in yourself. But I think that's a great point, is relying on others, connecting with others is great. That's part of this, having the courage to do that.
That's something really tangible that we can tell our listeners, to rely on others to see what you can't see, to value diversity of perspectives as leaders, to let the folks that you lead be who they are.
Yeah.
So Josh, this is a wonderful discussion about being more human, adding more humanity to the workplace, and not only philosophical, but also some tangible stuff. So thanks a lot for coming on and helping us learn today. We really appreciated your time.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Caroline. Nice talking with you.
So that was a fascinating discussion with Josh. I also enjoyed hearing Derek's take. So what did we learn about making the workplace more human?
Well, I think, Greg, one of the big things that I took away from this episode was just the huge value that is brought from diversity of perspectives. We talked a lot about there's just different people who approach things different ways, who live their life different ways, and often that can lead to some conflict. But really, the beauty of that is, I mean, it's really just different perspectives, and if we can embrace that and bring these people to more of a medium and bring them together to approach the workplace, I mean, that's really a benefit, and that way we can get past that immediate conflict once we learn to see the value in somebody else's way of living.
Yeah, and I also like the way Josh phrased it, that it's not a transaction. It's not just you do the work for a paycheck, or if it is, we don't want it to be. So we want to move from contract to covenant. And I thought that was really useful, because we would choose one of those two words to describe something purposefully, and you would never use one to describe something that's best represented by the other. So I like the idea that we have a covenant with each other to be part of this community together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Josh mentioned early on, this really came from him looking around and thinking, is this really the way that we want to work every day? Is this really the way that we're going to come in and feel so like stuffy from our office and feel like we can't really be ourselves? And I think it's such a simple question, but one that not everybody would ask. And I think he's one of those few people who caught on real quickly to, we can make this better, and we can make this an enjoyable experience coming to work. And why wouldn't we want to do that?
Yeah, John had I'll call it a dream, but he may use a different word, but he had an idea, a dream, a inspiration to create an environment that is atypical in manufacturing. And I think that's what he's done here at our company. Another thing that Josh talked about was these two components of a company. So he calls one the machine, how to be more efficient, how to earn more money, produce more product, get throughput, etc. And then the other is how to create community, how to care about other people, how to build relationships. He calls that the engine. And the engine and the machine are opposites. They don't really get along. That if you start to concentrate on one, it can be at the expense of the other. And what Josh said is to make a workplace human is to live within this tension. And that's a lot of art. There's no science there. And you probably never get it quite right. You're probably always, the pendulum swings a little bit on one side or the other. You never quite nail it. But I think it's important to acknowledge that as a business owner, I have to care about efficiency and profit and all of that kind of stuff that business classes taught me. But that this journey is teaching me also to think about community and relationships, and I have to live within that tension.
Well, and I think too, you can use that to think about what role should a person be in. You've talked a lot on this podcast about, you look at let me take care of the people of Arcamed and let me take care of the environment and make sure that they have what they need to be successful, and then put the right people in the right places, and they'll take care of all of that profit, goals, things that are really driving the bottom line of the company. And so I think these things can work together, although they seem like they're in this big conflict. And to Josh's point, that tension is where you can find the success of, you have to have both people, because if you have all of the engine or all of the machine, I mean, you're going to go way too far in that direction, and something's going to have to give. And I think there's a beauty in that, to try to find that balance. Again, I think we're often going to be more one way than the other, but having those people there to check each other almost, I think is key.
Yeah, if you have too much machine, which again is the business side, the profit efficiency, then you're going to sort of see the retention rate drop, and you're going to have an inability to recruit great people, and that'll show up in metrics. And if you concentrate too much on the engine, the relationships and community, and not enough on the machine, then you're going to go broke, and you'll have a great company that people love to work for that goes out of business. So we'll have to find the balance somewhere in the middle. Another thing that you said when you were talking to Josh was about how sometimes you don't see conflict. And Josh said, well, one thing you need to do is rely on others to see what you can't see, which I thought that was really interesting. I thought, that's an interesting way to interact with and rely on others.
Absolutely. And I think I've heard that from a couple of different people, and just the importance on, learning about your fellow peers as you're working together is really important, because now, as I said, I'm not great at detecting conflict. So often I'll walk out of a room, think that meeting went great, and then everyone else is like, wow, Caroline is just having a bad day today or something, and I'm thinking we had a great meeting. But, I think I've learned that it's so helpful for me to go talk to somebody in that meeting who I trust and who I know would have picked up on that and say, how did that really go? Because, otherwise I'm just sitting over here thinking everything's fine and dandy, and that's not a recipe for success. And I think, we need to find people's, innate abilities to pick up on different things and learn different things and really use them. And I think people feel valued too when you're going out of your way to ask them about these things.
Yeah, it made me think about and make a connection to our leadership training. The local outfit Advisa put this on for our leadership team, and one of the things they taught us was how to solicit feedback. And so I've made it a practice to, after meetings where I also don't know exactly how I landed with folks, solicit some feedback so that if there's some repair work that needs to be done, I wouldn't see it without soliciting feedback, and then I can get right to it rather than let it fester. So that's been helpful. So I thought this was a great episode, and one of the things I want to do is have our workplace be more human.
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciated hearing from Josh. You can just tell he thinks about culture on such an advanced level, and he's someone that I would like to talk to more in the future because he really cares about people, and he has the brain power to look at all of this and kind of see the hidden web in it all. So really appreciated it, and yeah, I'm looking forward to putting some of these things into action.
Me too.
On our next episode, we will discuss the topic of burnout. We will explore what it is, why it happens, and also how we can prevent it. We will be joined by registered nurse and senior consultant for practicing excellence, Renee Oinanen, also ER physician Dr. Louis Profeta, and professor of management at UT Arlington, Jim Quick.